Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I got all choked up. Seriously, I did. Thank you for being here with us this morning, and we'd like you to rise and join us on our first sing-along song called God You Are.
Sunrise, God you are, every moon glow, God you are, every star shine, every inch of earth and sky, God you are, every springtime, God you are, every snowfall, God you are, every season, every second of my life, everything I do, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything above, everything below, everything I know is you.
Good morning, Center for Spiritual Living. Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday celebration service. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are so welcome here with us this morning. We are a church, a center that honors all paths to the one, and therefore we begin our service, our call to service, with the lighting of the flames of faith. We perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples, all faiths, all sentient beings come from the one great universal presence, which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, which we honor here today. We light the candle for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. We light the candle for the shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous peoples, the way of primal spirituality. We light the candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. We light the candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law. We light the candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths as the path of compassion. We light the candle for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness as the path of love. We light the candle for Islam, honoring the path of compliance with the will of God as the highest calling. We light the candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light the candle for all forms of New Thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. And as practitioner Dave Friedman lights the last candle, let it represent the path that you are on today. Please join me in prayer, taking in those truths as our own, knowing that there is only that one life, that one power, that one presence. It is all love, and we are each of it, as it. We are it in our own unique expressions. And so what I know is by means of this time together, this joyous celebration, we each receive a gift in consciousness. We each are open and receptive to that gift, whatever it may be. And by means of this, the time together, the talk, the music, the community, the love, we are raised and praised to a higher level. And we always are reminded of who we are. The I am that I am. I give thanks for this truth. I give thanks for each one here, for the blessing of each moment. And I simply let go. I let God. I know that my word has been spoken. It is powerful. It is done. And please join me in saying, and so it is. And now we have our affirmation of the day. Let's say it together. Today, I am realigned with spiritual truth, and so it is. And our declaration of principles. I believe in God, the one creative intelligence, operating through the universe and operating throughout my entire being, now and always. I believe this perfect spirit operates upon a law of mind and creates my experience exactly according to my belief. I believe this perfect creative intelligence can be used by me and by every other person to produce health, abundance, and love in mind, body, and total life experience. I use it now, and I rejoice in it, and so it is.
Please welcome our soloists for today, doing double duty, Karen Allen and Rick Dale.
You ever listen to God? Well, we're going to do a song about that because God comes in many forms, and you got to listen to him, you know. Sometimes it's out of the mouths of babes, and this babe. It's called Listen to the Voices of God. Listen to the voices of God. They reveal what we really know. Listen to the song of love. It beats the heart of life, the heart of life.
In the dawning of a new day, Spirit is here, present in my awakening to love. As I listen to the voices of God,
stretching out to meet my being, I live in eternal life, joining with all in ever-present love. As I listen to the voices of God, listen to the voices of God. They reveal what we really know. Listen to the song of love.
in the dancing leaves. In the silent stillness, I perceive, I believe the voices of God.
In the arms of absolute peace, I know that we all live here, and from my soul I thank you all with love as I listen to the voices of God.
Listen to the voices of God. They reveal what we really know. Listen to the song of love. It beats the heart of life. Yes, we listen to the voices of God. They reveal what we really know. Listen to the song of love.
It beats the heart of life,
The heart of life.
Allendale.
To introduce today's speaker. He's one of our staff ministers. He has written a book, and he is very wise and wonderful. And we get to hear his talk this morning, which is pause. No, that's actually the August theme is pause for guidance, and his talk today is time for a tune-up. Sounds very interesting. So, Reverend Bruce Fredenberg. Yay!
You know, boys and girls, that I am old enough to remember when the bank preferred that I took my mask off before I came in, instead of my sunglasses. So it's been an adjustment. And for those of you who were wondering why I've gone Borg, well, once you go Borg, you never go somewhere else. So when you hear of a tune-up, how many people think of your car? So why would I need a tune-up? Well, maybe this happens to you. From time to time, I'm not paying attention to my daily spiritual practices and don't do them daily. They become like weekly or monthly or longer practices. And if I don't do them daily, like their daily practices, then I find my mind sort of drifts back into habitual thinking, and I start looking at life from conditions rather than from cause and source. Does anybody besides me ever do that? Just you, Bruce, just like the 6th grade all over again. Little self-disclosure, don't do it, don't do it. Okay, so I start paying attention to the circumstances of my life rather than the causes, and then I'm just drifting. I'm not participating in the co-creation of my life. I'm just drifting with the current. And when that happens, you know, sometimes things work, sometimes they don't work. Anybody have that experience in life? So I guess, and I was dealing with that this last week. Caught in conditions. I had invested in something that I thought would be, and still I'm willing to think that it will be a good idea, but I found myself doubting and having this inner dialogue where I was rehearsing my disaster. Does anybody else ever rehearse your disaster? You know, when you rehearse your disaster so you can get it just right, you don't want to miss anything. You know, so, well, I was doing that. You know, you might call it anxiety, might call it not so helpful self-talk. And then I realized I shouldn't be doing that because, that's more likely to make it occur. But what could I do about it? And I realized what I can do about it is have a different thought, have some confidence in what I've done. Or just because something didn't work for somebody else doesn't mean it won't work for me, right? He said almost convincingly. Anybody else have that struggle sometimes where you really want to believe what you want to believe? And so I forget what I've learned from our philosophy when this happens. I forget that there is a power greater than I am, and it's available for me to use it, and it's operated by my beliefs, by my thought. And so if I'm having thoughts that are reinforcing my fears, I often ask people this question: where do you want to put your faith? In your hopes or your fears? Because I was putting my faith in my fears. So this power that I said works on thought, well, it actually works on beliefs. So if you think of it like if you had this enormous machine that would, like a really, really good virtual reality, but way, 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 way better than wearing a mask or something like that or a thing. And this would really give you experiences of what you believed. And when I say believe, I don't mean what do I hope, what do I wish, but what do I really believe? And I don't know about you, but I find it hard a lot of times to change a belief. Because I call it a belief because that's what I believe is true. And it's the thing I want to have happening that's not happening that seems like that's not true. That's not a belief. That's a hope and a wish. Anybody ever do that? So another person who's dangerously close to self-disclosure was nodding his head. Thanks, Rick. So I know I'm not alone. You probably had the same 6th grade experience I did. Okay, so when I turn my attention to this reality, this concept that there is a creative something that is creating my life according to my beliefs, well, then I can spend some necessary time learning how to change my beliefs. And then I can use this knowledge to create specific results. And that's really prayer. Ernest Holmes wrote about learning to pray aright. Interesting word, aright. Sort of seems colloquial somehow. It sounds like it might be Old English. I think he meant doing it in a way that works. Prayer, doing it aright. And so when you understand how something works, then you can use it. So it's worthwhile taking some time to learn how this works. And for a lot of us have unconscious beliefs, because that's important to know, because Dr. Holmes wrote about that a lot in some of his later writings. In fact, he created a 4-volume home study course that came out in the early 50s and longer. And he really just went back and re-examined everything he had written and done and taught and believed. And so it's really refined out, and it's meant to be done in a year. And I have a study group with a couple of other practitioners, and we are on our 3rd or 4th year of trying to get through this 1-year course, because it's really good, and so many paragraphs are just filled with really dense, impactful information that takes a while to get our minds around. And so it's our unconscious beliefs are just as powerful as our conscious beliefs. And if they're unconscious, well, that's what they are. They're unconscious. So we just have to look at the results and maybe infer what some of our beliefs are. But some people think it's selfish to pray for specific things, particularly if they're physical things or monetary things. And it's not selfish, because it's important to remember this only works if you're attempting to have events come into your life that you would want for someone else as well as yourself. So the key thing is it's got to be beneficial for the whole and harm no one. And if you can't start at home in your own self in making changes in your own circumstances, how are you going to convince anybody else that they could do it too? And so it's important, because if this is true, that means that these practices should and do create observable changes in the conditions of our life. And so that's, hence we've all heard this thought, this idea of change your thinking, change your life. Well, it's really true. But because a lot of our thoughts are unconscious, it doesn't seem like I wanted that in my life. Who wanted that? Anybody want that disaster you so carefully rehearsed so that you didn't want it, but then there it is, I didn't want that. Well, perhaps I did. So one of the things that you can do is you can learn how to clean up and eliminate any beliefs you have in anything that limits your ability to believe that you are dealing with an unlimited power, governed by love, and that for reasons of its own created this multiplicity of individual points of consciousness. I'm guessing, because I don't, the big mind knows more than I do, but I'm guessing it does that because there are certain types of learning, of experiences, that can only be had in a physical form. Hence, here we are. We are spirit's vehicles for learning and experiencing more about itself, because apparently part of its nature is to constantly create. And so the creation is automatic from our thoughts. They're reflected into this capacity of this creative something that is just constantly creating based on what directions we're giving. Now, some of you are giving directions I think that I would disagree with because they affect me too, but I don't have to accept those. I can change those. But it's just important to understand. Think of it like a mirror. If I put something in front of a mirror, it's automatically going to reflect back what I put there. So if I don't want to see an awful picture of something, don't put that in front of the mirror. Put something else in front of the mirror. Does that make sense to anybody? Okay, so if you consider the idea that we all come from one source, and this source created everything, then it's not likely to be that hard to consider that if this creative something created everything, then it can change anything it created. Just like a movie maker. If they're making a movie and they don't like the story, they can make changes in the story. Or a writer or a painter might decide they don't like one part of it. They can paint over it. Make it, I can't do it. If the painting can't recreate itself. But the good part is that we don't have to supply the power. The power already exists. It's just waiting for our direction. So if you want to give it direction about anxiety and fear and doubt, that is absolutely your right, but I don't recommend it any more than I recommended it to myself last week. But I failed to get out of it until I spent a lot of time remembering that. Anybody else find that you really want it to not be anxious, and yet there you are? So it's worth learning some ways to overcome that, and we'll touch on that in a second. Because I want to emphasize this is a practice, a philosophy. It's not a method where we delude ourselves. Dr. Holmes was very careful to point out we never say peace when there's no peace. We don't say everything's all right when it's clearly all wrong. But what the difference is the conditions are malleable. If they're created by thought, thought is automatically, by definition, fluid. It's changeable. So the difference is not that we're saying everything's all right when it's clearly not all right. The difference is that we're not trying to change anything. We're trying to bring ourselves into a reality of recognizing the true nature of our existence. That everything's supposed to work out just great. Hence, what's the point of having us? What's the point of creating us? So if we're dealing with an omnipotent power that cares about us and that is governed by love and order, perfect order. If you plant a watermelon seed, you'll never get celery. We take that for granted. But really that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Everything is just ordered perfectly. It's like if you follow the instructions, then things work well. Has anybody ever tried to put something together that they were confident they could put together and didn't read the instructions and found out they broke something really quick? I did that with plumbing once, which is why Yolanda doesn't let me do plumbing anymore. Okay, so how does all this work as a practical bit of knowledge? I mean, I could say there's electricity. There's this thing called electricity, and it permeates the universe, and it has all this power. And you'd be saying, yeah, and so what? How can I use it to heat up water, to make a light? Well, I'd have to understand the principles of how electricity works. So just saying there's something called electricity, but not knowing the principles that make it work, it's not very helpful, huh? You know, you put a kite up there and put a key in the bottom, and pretty soon you're Ben Franklin getting shocked, but he still couldn't make a car. Okay, so start with the concept that we're living in a spiritual universe. Right now we are, and we always have been. The universe is real enough. I'm not saying that it's not real, but physical conditions can be changed when we understand that everything originates in thought. And our beliefs, including our unconscious beliefs, are going to activate a creative function in the big mind in which we all exist. And that creative function creates conditions that correspond, in a way, the validity of our beliefs. Somebody wrote to Louise Hayes one time saying, you say like attracts like. Anybody heard that? Like attracts like. And this person said, well, you know, people are always stealing from me in my business. Does that mean I'm a thief? Because I'm having the thief? And, you know, she thought that that was kind of a two-dimensional concept. Doesn't exactly work that way. She suggested what might really be going on is that this woman did not respect herself. And so she created, attracted, looked for conditions that validated people not respecting her. And what would be more disrespectful than stealing? So she could have been operating looking at the wrong problem. The problem wasn't that she was a thief. The problem was she didn't respect herself. So if you think of the universe that way, this is a little anthropomorphic, but it's as if spirit watches you and notices what you seem to be entertained by, what fascinates you, what do you spend a lot of time thinking about. He seems to like anxiety a lot. Or I notice he spends a lot of time in fear. I notice that she spends a lot of time doubting herself. Well, your wish is my command. Here it is. Lots of things in life that'll make you feel like you're right and you're right at home. Because who doesn't like to be validated? You know, I hate it when I'm right that way. And yet here we are. So, as we learn to change these beliefs, you could take the perspective of, I thought my way into this condition, so I should be able to think my way out of it. Oh, that's a useful idea. So who's ever tried that? And did it work? Eventually. Sometimes it took less than eventually. The more I practiced it, the more I needed a tune-up, the more my daily practices were happening every other month, the longer it took for anything to change. Because in addition to the thought, there's the feeling that's activated by that thought that really powers this creativity. So if our thought is one thing, but the feeling activated is fear or discouragement or doubt, you can see it creates kind of a push-pull. And then we have lives that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Imagine this idea. It turns out that every nanosecond, our brain receives about, it's been estimated, maybe as many as 10,000 thoughts per nanosecond, just from our five senses, you know, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. And that's not counting the ideas that are activated by memories, thoughts that come up. But 10,000 pieces of valid information every nanosecond coming into my brain. Now, granted, my brain can somehow unconsciously handle all that, but consciously, nobody can make sense of that booming, buzzing confusion. In fact, it turns out if you were to do a test of somebody's ability to remember random numbers and, you know, give them a list, then it turns out that most people can handle between 7 and 11 discrete items before they forget it and have to go on to, like in a conversation, if somebody's talking too quickly, like I often do, they'll follow part of it and then they got the rest of it, but there's no time for it to go into the short-term memory and process, so we just forget. That's why a lot of people who weren't raised with computers need the instructions on how to turn it on and how to reach everything, because we didn't grow up where everything's instinctual. I'm a digital immigrant, not a digital native. So I need it written down, because to me it's all random numbers. Why would that happen? Oh, well, I'll try it. Hey, look, it did. It shows up on the screen. Anybody have that experience where somebody says, oh, just do this, because they're 14, and they say, oh, just do this, that, and the other thing, and their hands are flying across the keyboard like you could follow both? Ever had that? Yeah, well, so that's how our brain is, based on all this physical information about the conditions of our life. So what we do is we focus on the things that are important to us. And the things that are important to us, it varies from culture to culture. Part of raising a kid is to teach them how to survive in the physical world, right? So, you don't cross the road without holding your mom's hand. You don't put your hand on a burning stove. Don't take things that your neighbor has, especially if they're bigger than you, because they may have a temper. And so every culture teaches us what's important and what's not, but it's not necessarily the same thing that's important to everybody else. And then those things that are important to us are also shaped by our experiences in life. Maybe one time we did something, had a bad experience with it, and then assume that's how it's always going to be. And then what we do is we maintain these beliefs by rehearsing them every day. We're reinforcing them, and we're acting as if they're all true. And so we don't even notice all the other stuff that's there. And so, we're constantly creating our own holograph. And it's happening every minute. And it's like your television refreshes itself every so often. And if you have an inexpensive television that refreshes itself like 60 cycles per second, and you're watching a sporting event, the ball just kind of goes like that. And if you've invested a little more in your TV, it looks like it's a real movement. But it's really a refresher thing that's happening and renewing itself so fast your eye can't see it. So Bruce, what makes you think that they're going to believe any of this? Well, let me give you an example from your own life. Has anybody ever lived with someone like a spouse or a friend or a partner where occasionally you would drive their car somewhere instead of your own? Anybody done that? Okay, who's done this? You go to the market, and I take maybe Yolanda's car. She has a black car, I have a red car. Different times they've been different. So I drive her black car to the market, I go in, and then I'm coming out of the market, and what am I looking for? I'm looking for my red car. And the black car's right there, and it's become totally invisible to me. I'm walking around the park. Anybody done that? You have. You have. We see what we expect to see. And every other possibility becomes invisible to us. In fact, I demonstrated this I actually made myself, for all practical purposes, invisible during what was appearing to be a minor riot. I was in Seattle with a friend of mine, and we were at a park, and it was a jazz festival, and it was really good, and there was a really nice crowd there. A lot of black people in Seattle, but not just black people, but it was just, it was important that it was a largely black audience. Because into this black audience came an outlaw motorcycle gang who were very flagrant in their racist apparel, and they started picking fights with these people. Now, there were a lot more of the black people, and some of them were really big and strong, but they all went off behind a bush. And then a few minutes later, maybe half a dozen of these outlaw bikers come running out, like they're running for their lives, because there's a whole big crowd chasing them. And they're heading right towards me. And I'm another white guy with long hair, and my friend's a white guy with long hair. And there's this crowd that's about to be really violent heading right to us. And what we did, just instinctively, we made eye contact and just thought and talked about anything than what was happening around us, Like, we weren't going to play Race Riot or Get Your Head Beat In. We were not here for that. And they actually used us as a turnstile going around while they were chasing people. I mean, it was really amazing to watch them running right at us and then just sort of use us like skiers, going through the gate. And so for all intents and purposes, just by that act, we made ourselves invisible. We weren't part of the game, part of the possibility. At least that's how I remember it. So, if you consider that, the car thing, going out, walking right by the car you came in, invisible. Okay, so we see what we expect to see, and we experience whatever we encounter by what we have experienced before. And that calcifies our belief our ability to create other beliefs. So again, start with the concept. There's an underlying reality behind physical experience. And think of the analogy of a holograph. You know, we create our own expectation by what we believe, what we're expecting. And because it projects the beliefs of everyone else too, and we all put our own spin on our own movie, and it looks real. But consider that everything in the scenario is actually fluid and changeable once you know how it works. And you don't have to put in the power's already there. We don't have to create the intelligence is expressing through us. We don't have to create the substance, the supply, that's already provided. What we need to bring is conviction of our belief. Not a hope, not a prayer, but a conviction. And these thoughts, to have real power, must be felt as belief. This requires persistent practice, and you already know that because that's how we created all our other beliefs. We thought them, we learned them, we kept thinking them minute after minute, year after year. And anybody ever had experiences that surprised them? Yeah, well, you know, just because you were thinking it didn't mean it was real. That really, okay, that's good. But you've all had those experiences. We can have different experiences. And many of us have put a lot of time and energy rehearsing and repeating our disasters until we have them mastered. So if you're going to put energy into something, try, at least give this a try. Give it a try. Now, changing beliefs is not always easy. And we're not talking about deluding ourselves. That's a fool's errand. We're talking about awakening from our trance of self-limiting beliefs about lack and limitations. And I really believe everybody lives in a trance. As a therapist, and I learned more about hypnosis, and I realized we all do live in a trance. I'm going to say 4 words. Actually, I'm going to say 3 words. And by the time I say the 3rd word, you are going to find it impossible not to know the 4th word. So I'd like you to, do I have your agreement? Will you do your best to not know the 4th word? Do whatever you need to do. Okay, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, see? Now, if I'd said that in a cadence you didn't know, and a language you'd never heard, it would just be noise, right? Have the same meaning. Like if I could speak Arabic and said it in Arabic, it'd still mean 1, 2, 3, 4, but you'd be, it doesn't mean anything. But you're familiar with that, and you cannot not do it. So our brain acts as a call and response mechanism. It's how our early ancestors survived. And what they survived on was noticing where danger lied. And noticing where danger lied was way more important than knowing that you're having a good time. So our brain, over the 50,000 years, it hasn't changed, so it developed a negative bias, and our brain's always scanning for trouble. And that's how we survive. But we've reached a point in our own evolution where we don't have to be doing that all the time. We can actually take deliberate steps to modify our beliefs, and that will change our lives. That's how we maintained all of our beliefs. Let's see, I brought this with me. It's a great book, by the way. It's really hard to find. It's by Dr. Carlton Whitehead. Somebody might want to write that down. And he taught Dr. Jackie. If any of you knew Dr. Jackie, he was her teacher. And he was one of Dr. Holmes' original group of ministers. And he happened to be the main speaker for Adventures in Faith the very first year I came to this center. And, and he had this book, and I got to talk to him, and he was really a great book. Everybody I've ever recommended to has thanked me for recommending it. It's out of print, but you can occasionally find a copy on Amazon or someplace. And so he uses this analogy. He says, the power of God can do for you only what it can do through you. And understanding this fundamental principle is essential to the effective use of creative meditation. In it, we discover why the potential of abundant life in everyone is limited in expression. So consider this illustration. I could just tell it from memory, but he expresses it so nicely. Fred connected the hose and turned on the faucet. Do you remember garden sprinklers? Anybody used to have a lawn sprinkler? Okay. So Fred had one of those, and he hooks it up, turns it on, and to his surprise, only a trickle of water came from the sprinkler. A check on the faucet indicated full pressure. A check of the hose revealed a number of leaks, and through which force and flow were being dissipated. Fred repaired the leaks, and the sprinkler worked perfectly. And so the faucet represents the unlimited source of substance and power to which we are permanently connected. The sprinkler, any constructive creative idea you desire expressed in your life. The hose is your consciousness through which the substance and power flow from the source to expression. So if you want a different pattern on the lawn for sprinkling, you need to have a different sprinkler. But if you want it to work at all, you need to repair the leaks. So he asked, if your desired good is not manifesting, check for and repair power links. These are in your conscious thoughts and feelings that divert divine energy to no good purpose. Those no good nicks. The major leaks, fear, doubt, hate, anger, self-pity, etc., that can divert the entire flow are obvious, and volumes have been written about how to handle them. To detect and stop the leaks, remember the principle: power flows toward the object of your attention. Then ask yourself, is my attention on idle or negative talk, my own or another's? Gossip, simple or pernicious? Purposeless reading or television viewing? Silent, victorious debate with some imaginary opponent? The French refer to that as staircase wisdom. Stupid jerk, that's what I should have told him. I like that. Staircase wisdom, how many of us do that, you know? Okay, so if any of these are going on, is this where I really want the power? The choice is yours. If the answer is no, withdraw your attention and you stop the leak. In the case of idle chatter or gossip, one need not be rude. Simply change the subject, remain polite, silent, or courteous, and leave. As the leaks are repaired, the power increases, and the point of your desired good goes from a trickle to full force. And so you understand why John Ciardi, I forget who he is, I think he was a famous author, but he said, a man is finally defined, and I'm sure it's true for women too, finally defined by what you do with your attention. So what can you do? Well, take a class. Most of us who've studied this didn't get it right away. You know, it sounds good. Do it for a little bit and then walk away. Well, you know, I've done a lot of things that sounded good, but if you don't put in the time. And so take a class. It's been my observation that more people spend more time and money researching the best home entertainment system than they do on finding ways to improve their life. I've heard people say, oh, the classes are too expensive. Well, I don't have that kind of time. But they always find time to research things that maybe might divert them from their lives, distract them from the pain, but not really change it. Does that sound like anybody knows? I bet you have a friend who does this. Okay? Okay, so another thing is talk with any of the practitioners here and find out what changes have occurred for them as a result of studying and practicing these ideas. You could book a meeting with a practitioner, and those practices work, but you know, we're not going to get the results we want, as Holmes said it. He said in his book, he said, we won't get the results by saying a few idle phrases. And this calls for calm. I'm not talking about strain. He really emphasizes there should be no sense of strain, but there needs to be a calm and constant sense of insistent determination to reorganize the whole body of our thought until we have a constant sense of feeling. Try and imagine just for a second what it would feel like to have a conscious connection with the creator and animator of the universe that's constantly there and just waiting for your next order on how are you going to have a good life. And when you get that feeling of an unbreakable union, when you've done this long enough, then at least most of your thoughts will automatically trigger the creative reaction of creative mind into something that you want rather than the disaster that you may have previously rehearsed. And so it's my idea, it's a little anthropomorphic, but I think that spirit holds nothing against me and is just waiting for me to get with the process, get with the plan, because if Spirit created me in order to have this learning experience in a physical form, I suspect Spirit has a whole lot more fun being me when I'm having a good time than when I'm letting Spirit know how anxiety feels. So, there's your tune-up. Namaste.
Please welcome back Allendale.
We were talking about listening to God earlier, and so listen. Don't you feel it growing day by day? People getting ready for the news. Some are happy, some are sad. Oh, you got to let music play. What people need is a way to make them smile. It ain't so hard to do if you know how. Gotta get a message, get it all through. Oh, mama, it's gonna do after a while. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit all the time.
Well, I know you know better everything I say. Meet me in the country for a day. We'll be happy and we'll dance. Oh, we're gonna dance the blues away. And if I'm feeling good to you and you're feeling good to me, there ain't nothing we can't do or say. Feeling good, feeling fine. Oh, you got to celebrate the day.
Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit all the time. Like a lazy flowing river, surrounding castles in the sky, and the crowd is growing bigger, listening for the happy sound, but you got to let them flow. Listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit all the time. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit. Oh, listen to Spirit all the time.
Allendale.
Switching hats again. Okay. Well, now it's time for us to share our appreciation for the inspiration we've received today through the giving of our money substance. So for those of you who are here, we have the offering baskets at each of the doors. And for those of you who are visiting us online, you can go onto our website and donate via PayPal, or you can mail in your donation. And yeah, appreciate that. And now let's do our prosperity affirmation. My offering is my acceptance of God as the source of my supply and symbolizes the faith in the abundant flow of this supply.
Breathe on me, Spirit. Breathe on me. Hear the cry of my heart now, Spirit. Breathe on me. Breathe through me, Spirit. Breathe through me. Hear the call of my heart now, Spirit. Breathe through me. Breathe through me, Spirit. Breathe through me. Hear the joy in my heart now, Spirit. Breathe as
Thank you, Diane. Beautiful. And while we're at it, let's thank all the people who have been in service today. And we'll start with our music director, choir director, extraordinaire Diane King Van at the piano, guitarist Ed Cusby, bass player Bill Dixon, and our fabulous David Page on the drums, best drummer in the world. And we have Rick Dale doing our song leading and the music today. Thank you. And back in the sound booth, we have Josh Schreiber behind the sound, and Mary doing the PowerPoint, and Dave back there helping out as well. He's hiding. And operating the camera today is our awesome Noir. Thank you all for serving today. And we have 3 practitioners in service, and they are available after the service to meet with you. And so if you want more good in your life, or if you just want someone else to see your truth, meet with one of these practitioners, and they are trained in the art and science of spiritual mind treatment. And this is our free gift to you on Sundays. And guess what? It's August 1st, and so we want to honor those of you who have a birthday in August. So if that's you, please stand. Yay! Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Yay! And now, Rick Dale with the invitations.
Boy, do we have some invitations for you today. You are invited to Conscious Connection right here in this very room after the service from 12 to 12:30. Get together with Mary Brogdon and friends for a brief discussion about today's topic. Next week, our speaker is Reverend Kath DePalma, whose message will be A Playful Pause. Her time with us is winding down, so let's be present next week and support Reverend Kath as she so lovingly has guided us through a most challenging time of transition here at the center. Due to the new CDC recommendations, Shifting Sands has decided it will not be meeting in person after all. It will proceed online. Same bat time, same bat channel, Thursday mornings at 10:30 on Zoom.
I'm not sure about that. We'll have to ask for sure if that's going on. That's why it's in parentheses.
Okay, this is in parentheses. Try to say that 3 times really fast. It's could be happening. This Friday evening, August 6th at 7 p.m., our Women's Circle is hosting a free movie and popcorn night for the whole family. The featured film is Amazing Grace and Chuck, a heartwarming film about a young boy who raised a question about an issue that affects us all. For questions, please see Mary Brogdon and make sure it's happening. There will be no book study with Mary this week, but it will resume on Wednesday, August 2nd from 10 to 11:30 with a new book called The Knowing, 11 Lessons to Understand the Quiet Urges of Your Soul. And for those of you who knew Joan LaMontagne, her Celebration of Life service, which was delayed due to COVID, is next Sunday, August 8th, at the Balboa Yacht Club from 3 to 6 p.m. She made her transition on November 18th, 2020, but forever lives in our hearts and minds. Let's sing.
All right.
On your feet.
When I listen, I see clearly. When I listen, I know. When I listen, I find perfect peace. When I listen to the voice of Spirit in me.
Sing out.
When I listen, I see clearly. When I listen, I know. When I listen, I find perfect peace. When I listen to the voice of Spirit in me. When I listen, I see clearly. When I listen, I know. When I listen, I find perfect peace. When I listen to the voice of Spirit in me. When I listen to the voice of Spirit in me. When I listen to the voice of Spirit in me.
Please repeat after me. Something wonderful is happening as me today. It's happening through my mind. It's happening through my body. It's happening through all my affairs. Thank you, God. And so it is.